The snow came down wrong that night, not the clean kind that softened the city and made people stop to take photographs with their phones held up like offerings. This was the other kind, dirty and wind-driven, half sleet and half exhaust, coating the sidewalks in a gray film that turned everything into a slick black mirror. Nora Voss had been walking through it for 6 blocks because the bus had been running 23 minutes late and she could not afford to wait. She was already going to be 4 minutes behind the start of her shift at Ashford House, and 4 minutes was enough for the floor manager to dock her a full half hour. She could not lose a half hour. Not this week. The electric bill was $63 past due. The daycare invoice sat on her kitchen counter under a magnet that said, "Keep going," in letters that had started to peel at the edges, which she found either appropriate or cruel, depending on the hour. She pushed through the staff entrance on 51st with her coat soaked through at the shoulders and her fingers so stiff she could barely work the buttons of her locker. The other servers moved around her in various states of preparation. Lipstick in locker mirrors, hair pinned with practiced speed, black aprons tied and retied. The air smelled like garlic butter and expensive perfume leaking in from the dining floor and underneath both. The industrial cleaner the kitchen crew used on the tile every morning. "You are 4 minutes late," said the voice behind her. The floor manager. She had heard him coming by the weight of his footsteps, which were the footsteps of a man who believed his presence in a room was an event worth announcing. "The bus was 23 minutes late," she said, without turning around. "Mathematically, I am ahead." He did not find this amusing. He stood in the doorway, holding his tablet like it was documentation of her failings, and looked at her the way certain men looked at certain women, like she was a variable that kept producing the wrong number. "Table 11 is a private booking. 6 covers, 8 o'clock. I need you on it." She turned to look at him. Why not Derek? Because the man who booked it tipped $4,000 the last time he came in. "And I need someone experienced." He paused. "Change your lipstick. The coral reads flat under the dining room lights. Use the red." He left before she could respond. She stood in front of her locker mirror and looked at herself for one moment. 23 years old, and she looked it, but only in the right light. The wrong light showed what the last 4 years had deposited on her, the shadows under her eyes that no concealer fully covered, the tension stored in the hinges of her jaw from grinding her teeth in her sleep, which she had been doing since Iris was born and had not stopped. She thought about Iris now, 4 years old, and staying with Mrs. Halverson from the apartment 2 floors up, who charged $40 cash for weeknight sitting and sometimes forgot the warm milk before bed. She had left an extra blanket on Iris's cot. She had told her daughter she was the bravest girl in New York. Iris had looked up at her with those dark, impossible eyes and said, "I know, Mama," with the absolute certainty of a child who had never had cause to doubt it. Nora changed her lipstick to red. The dining room at Ashford House operated on a specific kind of theater. The lighting was warm and amber and strategic, designed to make everyone inside look like a slightly improved version of themselves. The tables were set with linen, changed between each seating, and crystal glasses the bussers polished individually before service. The wine list ran to 44 pages, and the cheapest bottle was $280. The chef had 2 Michelin stars and a waiting list 8 months deep. The clientele came for the food, certainly, but mostly they came because being seen at Ashford House meant something in this city, and there were people in this city for whom being seen was the entire architecture of their existence. Nora had been working here 14 months. She was good at the job. She had learned to read the room, who needed more attention, and who needed to be left alone, who was on a date they were not supposed to be on. She had learned to move through the space like she was invisible when it suited the guests, and visible when it suited the bill. She picked up the private booking card from the host stand. Table 11, reserved under Hale Group L, LC 6. Covers, 8 o'clock arrival. Dietary notes, none. Special requests, privacy screen positioned to block the direct sight line from the bar. She walked to the east alcove, where table 11 sat raised above the main floor, separated by a partition of dark wood and frosted glass. The table was already set. The privacy screen had been positioned. 2 of the 6 chairs were occupied by men she did not recognize, both large, both wearing suits that did not quite disguise the way they were built, the density of men who were paid to watch doorways and assess rooms. They had the alertness of people always halfway somewhere else in their attention. She began checking the setup, adjusted a wine glass by a centimeter, checked the candle. She had her back to the entrance of the alcove when she felt the room change. Not loud, not obvious. A shift in the frequency of ambient sound, the way a room changes when someone walks into it who takes up more space than their physical body technically occupies. The kind of change you feel in your sternum before your brain has processed it. She turned around. The world tilted sideways for exactly 3 seconds. He was standing at the entrance of the alcove, one hand resting loosely at his side, a phone in the other. He was flanked by 2 more men, mirror images of the 2 already seated, and he was wearing a suit so dark it was nearly black charcoal gray, visible only at certain angles. The jacket cut close across shoulders that had gotten broader in 5 years. His hair was nearly black, slightly too long at the collar, but everything else had hardened. The jaw, the set of his eyes, the quality of stillness he had always carried, which had once felt like restraint, and now felt like something built over a different architecture entirely. The scar was new, a clean pale line bisecting his left eyebrow. Rowan Hale. For 3 full seconds, Nora did not move. His eyes found her the way his eyes had always found her, immediately and completely, with the focus of someone who had always been able to locate her in any room. He stopped walking. The 2 men flanking him continued forward by half a step, before registering that he had stopped and adjusted, without a word, their attention moving to scan the broader dining room with the practiced efficiency of men who did this work professionally. Rowan looked at her. She looked at him. The candle on table 11 hissed faintly in a breath of air she could not locate. His expression did not break. It did not crack or flood with obvious emotion. What it did was something more precise and more dangerous. It went very still in a way that was different from his baseline stillness, like a man who has just discovered something he was not prepared to discover and is rapidly and silently calculating what it means. "Welcome back, Mr. Hale." That was the floor manager's voice from somewhere behind her, bright and unaware of everything. "We have everything prepared." Rowan's eyes moved to the floor manager for exactly 2 seconds. Then they came back to Nora. "Good," he said. His voice was the same. She had not expected that. She had expected something marked by the years, some change in its register. But it was the same low, unhurried tone she had heard in her own head approximately 10,000 times since he had disappeared. He moved to the table with the economy of someone who never wasted motion. He took the chair that placed his back against the wall and his sight line on the entire room and sat. Nora stood at the service station and breathed. She made sure her face was arranged correctly. She had been a server long enough to know how to compose a face under pressure, and she used every piece of that skill now because the alternative was to do something she could not take back, like walk out of the dining room, or say the thing sitting at the front of her throat with both hands wrapped around its collar, ready to be said. 5 years. You were gone for 5 years. She picked up her order pad. She walked to table 11. She stood at Rowan's right side and looked at a point approximately 2 inches above his shoulder. "Good evening. My name is Nora, and I will be taking care of you tonight. Can I start the table with still or sparkling water?" The pause before he answered lasted 1 beat too long. "Sparkling," he said, "for the table." His voice was perfectly neutral. She was perfectly neutral. Two people who had been wrecked by each other, performing neutrality in a candlelit alcove while a room full of people with money drank expensive wine and talked about things that did not matter. She took the water order and walked back to the service station and stood with her hands braced against the counter and looked at the wall for 5 seconds. Then she got the sparkling water and brought it back and poured it, and did her job because she had a daughter at home in an apartment where the heat had been cutting out for 2 weeks, and she could not afford to have feelings about Rowan Hale tonight or any other night. The service lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. For 2 hours and 40 minutes, Nora did her job with the precision of someone operating under high stakes. She took the full table order, 6 men, none of whom introduced themselves, all of whom had the watchfulness of people accustomed to threat. She delivered and cleared and refilled and navigated the rhythms of a service she could perform in her sleep. She did not make unnecessary eye contact with Rowan. She did not linger, but she felt him watching her in the spaces between his conversations, the way you feel a change in barometric pressure, not with any single sense, but with all of them simultaneously, some animal alertness beneath rational thought. At 10:43, the last of his guests stood to leave. Rowan remained seated. Nora was collecting plates from the adjacent table when the floor manager appeared at her elbow. "Mr. Hale would like to speak with you when you have a moment." She set the plates down with more care than they required. "I am in the middle of closing." The floor manager's voice dropped. He was genuinely nervous. "The man tips $4,000. Please." She looked across the room at table 11. Rowan was sitting with one arm resting on the table, looking directly at her with an expression she could not read from this distance, which meant it was a controlled expression. Rowan had always been able to control his face when he chose to. It was one of the things she had learned about him at 18, sitting in the passenger seat of his second-hand truck in the parking lot of the gas station where he worked, that there were two Rowans, the one who showed his face and the one who kept it hidden. She had always assumed she could access both. She had been wrong about that. She crossed the room. She stood on the opposite side of the table. "The kitchen is closing in 15 minutes. Is there something else I can bring you?" "Sit down," he said. "I am working. Your manager just told you to take a break." She stopped, inhaled once. "What do you want, Rowan?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He gestured at the chair across from him with a slight movement of his hand, the kind of gesture that had become habitual for a man accustomed to things happening when he indicated they should happen. She sat, not because he gestured, because she had things to say, and she would rather say them sitting down. The candle between them was burning low. Outside the privacy screen, the restaurant was winding down, voices dropping, chairs being repositioned, the distant percussion of the kitchen beginning its closing routine. "You look the same," he said. "That is not what you want to talk about." "No." He looked at her. The controlled expression had shifted in some direction she could not name. "You are working as a server. I am aware of what I am doing. I was not judging it. You were noting it. Same thing coming from you." Something moved behind his eyes. He picked up his glass and set it down without drinking. "I did not know you were working here. You did not know anything about me. You made sure of that." The silence that followed had weight to it. Rowan had always known how to deploy silence as a thing with mass, but this one was different. This was a silence with 5 years packed into it, both of them sitting on either side of it like it was something neither of them could move. "Why didn't you call me?" she said. It came out as a statement rather than a question, more like reading a charge aloud. "I am not asking you to explain it right now. I am just stating it. You left. You did not call. You did not write." She stopped, pressed her teeth together, looked at the candle. "You left me at 18 years old with nothing, and now you are sitting in a restaurant where I work, and you want me to—" "What exactly?" "Catch up." Rowan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and very careful. "I came to explain. I do not need the explanation anymore. I built a life without it. I know." He looked at her. "What kind of life?" The question was too quiet. Something about the weight he put on the word what made her chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with something she had no intention of examining at 10:45 on a Tuesday night in December. She opened her mouth to say something, deflecting something that would allow her to stand up and end this conversation and get her coat and walk out into the dirty snow. What came out instead was something she had not planned. "I have a daughter." It came out the way truth sometimes does when you have been carrying it alone for too long. Not as a decision, as a release, a pressure valve opening without permission. She watched it land on him. He did not move. He did not flinch. But something behind his eyes changed so completely and so fast that for a moment he looked like a different person entirely. Like the Rowan she had known at 20, stripped of every layer the years had deposited, every controlled surface down to something raw and unguarded and terrified. "How old?" he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. Nora held his gaze. 4. Her name is Iris. The candle flickered. Rowan sat very still. His right hand on the table had closed slowly into a fist without him seeming to notice. He was looking at her with an expression she had no reference for, something between devastation and a terrible hunger. "Is she?" He stopped, started again. "Yes," Nora said, flat and clean, no inflection, because she had refused to give that question any softness, even in the privacy of her own head. The word landed between them like a stone dropped into still water. Rowan turned his head and looked at nothing for several seconds. She watched his throat work as he swallowed. The restaurant around them had gone nearly quiet. The last guests had filtered out. The kitchen had gone still. Somewhere behind the bar, glass clinked softly against glass. When Rowan turned back to look at her, the controlled expression was entirely gone. What was left was something she had no defense against. "I need you to hear me," he said. His voice had dropped to something she felt more than heard. "I left because I had to, because what I was walking into would have gotten you killed if you were attached to me." He stopped. His jaw worked. "I know that does not fix anything." He looked at her with the eyes that Iris had inherited without knowing where she had gotten them from. "She has been alive for 4 years, and I did not know," he said. "No," Nora said. "You did not." The silence this time was heavy with something more complex than accusation. Grief. The weight of time that cannot be reclaimed. Rowan reached into his jacket pocket and placed a card on the table between them. A matte black card with a single phone number and no name. "I am not going to disappear again," he said. "That is not a threat. I am telling you so you can decide what to do with it." Nora looked at the card. She did not pick it up. "I do not know what you have become," she said. "I do not know what any of this is." She gestured slightly toward the men who remained at a discreet distance near the alcove entrance, toward the armored quality of everything about the situation. "I know what that ad is, Rowan. I grew up in this city. I have seen it before." He did not deny it. He did not reach for any comfortable lie or reassuring half-truth. He looked at her steadily and said nothing, and somehow that was both worse and more honest than anything he could have said. "Give me 1 week," he said, "not to explain everything, just to meet her once. If you decide after that that it is not," he stopped, "I will respect whatever you decide." Nora sat with it for a moment. The card on the table, the low burning candle, the man across from her who had broken her open at 18 and scattered the pieces across 5 years of a life she had had to build herself, tile by tile, from the wreckage. She picked up the card, held it between 2 fingers without looking at it. "I will call you," she said, "when I am ready, not before." She stood. She tucked the card into the front pocket of her apron. She picked up the empty, sparkling water glass and the dessert fork he had not used, and carried them back toward the service station without looking behind her. At the staff exit, when she finally had her coat on and her bag on her shoulder and her hand on the door, she made the mistake of looking back one more time. Rowan was still at the table. He had not moved. He was looking at the middle distance, at something she could not see, and he probably could not see either, with an expression she recognized from years ago, from the parking lot of the gas station, from the nights they used to sit on the hood of his truck and watch the highway traffic and not need to fill the silence. The expression he got when he was computing something that did not have a clean answer. Except now it was the face of a man who had just learned he had a 4-year-old daughter 20 minutes ago. She pushed through the door and walked out into the cold. The snow was still falling. She walked the 6 blocks to the bus stop and stood under the cracked plastic shelter and watched the street and did not cry, because crying was a luxury she had stopped affording herself somewhere around Iris's 2nd birthday, when it became clear there was no version of her life that had room for it. She was practical. She was surviving. She was fine. The bus was 19 minutes late. She stood in the snow with Rowan's card in her apron pocket and felt it there like something warm, not burning, not yet, but present, the heat of something that had been waiting a long time. She did not sleep that night. She got home to find Mrs. Halverson asleep in the armchair with the television running low, and Iris curled in her cot under 2 blankets with her dark hair fanned across the pillow and her small mouth slightly open. Nora stood in the doorway of her daughter's room for 2 full minutes just looking at her, the shape of her face, the curl of her fingers around the stuffed rabbit she had found at a street sale 2 summers ago, the way she breathed, slow and deep and entirely trustful. She had Rowan's eyes, had always had them. Nora had cataloged this fact early and found ways to look at it sideways rather than directly. The eyes were his. The stubbornness was his. The way Iris sometimes went completely still and watchful, like something was happening just below the surface, that was his too. Nora paid Mrs. Halverson and locked the door and sat at the kitchen table with the card in front of her. She did not call. She was not going to call at midnight. She needed to figure out what ready meant before she could get there. She looked at the bills stacked at one end of the table. The electric bill past due, the credit card minimum she was barely making every month, the daycare invoice with the copay that still added up to something that made her monthly math work only if nothing broke, and nothing ever stayed unbroken for long. She folded the card and put it in the kitchen drawer under the takeout menus and went to bed. The next morning, Iris woke her at 6:15 by placing both small hands on Nora's face the way she always did, and saying, "Mama, Mama." It is morning, with the urgency she brought to all announcements, as though morning were an event that required notification. "I know," baby Nora said, pulling her in. "I know." Iris smelled like sleep and the detergent Nora used on her pajamas. She squirmed and chattered and demanded the breakfast she had been committed to for the past 2 weeks. Scrambled eggs with no runny parts and apple slices in a specific arrangement. Nora made it standing at the stove in her socks and yesterday's exhaustion, and thought about the card in the kitchen drawer. At 11:17, standing between the breakfast rush and the early lunch trickle at her morning job at the coffee counter on 6th, she took out her phone. She typed the number from the card. She typed, "This is Nora. Do not call me. I will let you know when to call." She sent it and put the phone face down and made 3 lattes and a drip coffee without looking at it for 20 minutes. When she finally looked, there was one response. Understood. That was it. No punctuation she could misread, no subtext to overanalyze. Just understood. She told herself it was cold, but she knew him well enough to read the compression in it, the restraint of a person holding back an enormous amount in 2 syllables. She put the phone in her apron pocket and went back to work. He was outside when she finished the dinner shift on Thursday. She walked out the staff door and the black car was parked at the curb. Not aggressively, not blocking anything. Just there. One of his men visible near the front of the vehicle. The rear window slightly lowered. She stopped on the sidewalk and looked at it, and the window rolled the rest of the way down. Rowan did not say anything. He just looked at her through the open window. Nora crossed the wet sidewalk and stood at the car window and looked at him. He was in a different suit. He looked like he had slept slightly less than she had, which she found unexpectedly satisfying. "I said I would call you," she said. "You have not called? It has been 4 days. I know how many days it has been." She looked at him for a moment. "You waited outside my job. I came to ask." He stopped. His jaw moved slightly. "I want to see her. I understand it is too soon. I understand you need time. But I have been sitting with this for 4 days, and I need you to know I am not going to disappear. I need you to believe that before you decide." She said his name, and the sentence stopped. "What are you now?" "Do not tell me about Hale Group. Tell me what you actually are." The silence was brief but total. "Dangerous," he said. Flat, simple. Not as a boast, more as a warning or an honesty. Dangerous, and I have enemies. And those are things you need to know going in. Going into what exactly? Whatever this is, whatever we have to figure out. His eyes held hers. "She is mine, Nora. I know I have not earned anything. I know I have no right to any part of this, but she exists, and I missed 4 years, and I cannot unknow that. The street noise filled the space between them, a cab horn somewhere, the distant percussion of the city's permanent soundtrack. Nora thought about Iris's face that morning, the way she had announced the morning like an event. The dark eyes she had gotten from somewhere Nora had tried not to think about for 4 years. "Sunday," she said, "there is a park 3 blocks from my apartment. We will be there at 10. You come alone. No men, no cars, just you." Something shifted in his expression. "If you cannot be alone in a public place for 1 hour," she said, "then you are too far into whatever this is for any of this to be a good idea." He held her gaze for a long moment. "Sunday," he said, 10 o'clock. Nora stepped back from the car. The window began to roll up. She stopped it with one hand on the frame, just enough to pause it. "Rowan," he looked at her, "if you do anything that frightens her, anything even accidentally, this ends. You understand me?" His expression for a moment was the one she recognized from underneath all the others, the unguarded one, the one that looked like the man she had known when the world was smaller and neither of them understood what was coming. "I understand," he said. She let the window go. She walked the 6 blocks home in the snow and did not let herself think about Sunday until she was inside with the door locked. But in her chest, something she had been keeping sealed for 5 years had cracked open just slightly along its seam, and no matter how she braced against it, she could feel the cold air getting in. Sunday came fast. She dressed Iris in her warmest coat, the red one, with the hood that was slightly too big, because Nora always bought a size ahead to extend the life of the purchase, and a knit hat with a bare face on it that Iris was very particular about, and waterproof boots, because there was still snow in the park, and Iris would find every wet patch if given the opportunity. "Where are we going?" Iris asked, already pulling on her boots with the focused determination she brought to all tasks. "The park by the swing with the red seat. The good swing. Can I have hot chocolate after, if you ate your breakfast first?" I ate breakfast. You ate 3 bites of egg and then announced you were done. Iris considered this with the philosophical seriousness of a 4-year-old weighing the technicalities of a contract. It was enough bites. It was not enough bites. They negotiated the egg situation for 5 minutes, arriving at 4 bites as a compromise which Iris consumed with great ceremony, and then they were out the door and into the cold, bright morning. The park was quiet at 10 o'clock. Dog walkers, a few joggers, a grandmother pushing a stroller along the path between the frozen fountain and the snow-covered benches. The swings were mostly empty. Rowan was already there. He was standing on the edge of the path near the swings alone, exactly as she had asked. His hands were in the pockets of a dark coat that was clearly expensive but worn like someone who was not thinking about it. He was watching the park with the outward-focused attention his men always had, except there was something underneath it this time, something in the set of his shoulders that was not threat assessment and was not security. It was fear. Nora recognized it because she knew what fear looked like on Rowan. It looked like stillness. Iris spotted the swings and pulled at Nora's hand. "The good swing, Mama." "In a minute." Nora walked toward him. Iris trotted alongside, looking around at the park with the comprehensive attention she brought to any new environment. Rowan turned when he heard their footsteps on the path. He looked at Nora, first a brief, acknowledging look. Then his eyes moved to Iris. Nora watched the thing happen that she had known was going to happen and had not fully prepared herself for. The moment a man looked at his own child for the first time and knew it in his body before his mind caught up. Iris looked back at him with the complete and evaluating frankness of a 4-year-old encountering a stranger. "Hi," she said. Rowan crouched. He did not hesitate about it or make it a considered gesture. He simply went down to her level with the naturalness of someone following an instinct until he was eye to eye with her in the snow. "Hi," he said. His voice came out rough at the edges. "I am Iris." He glanced at Nora briefly. "I heard." "Who are you?" Iris asked. Rowan's throat worked. Nora held her breath. "I am someone who knew your mom," he said, "a long time ago. My name is Rowan." Iris repeated it. "Rowan. Like the tree." "Like the tree," he confirmed, and something crossed his face. The ghost of something that, in another life, would have been simple amusement. "We learned about trees," Iris said very seriously. "Rowan trees have red berries." "They do." "Are they good to eat?" "Not particularly," he said. Iris accepted this and then looked at the swings. "I am going on the good swing now," she announced. "You can watch if you want." She broke away from Nora's hand and marched toward the swings with purpose, the bear hat nodding with each step. Rowan stayed crouched in the snow for a moment, watching her go. When he straightened and turned to look at Nora, his face had the expression she had been afraid of, the unguarded one, the one with no armor left in it. "She is." "Don't," Nora said. Her voice came out rough. "Just watch her for now." He nodded. He turned toward the swings. They stood side by side in the cold and watched Iris claim the good swing and begin pumping her legs with absolute dedication, the red coat and the bear hat rising and falling against the pale winter sky. And for one moment, standing in the snow-covered park, with Rowan beside her and Iris in the air ahead of them, Nora felt the vertigo of two timelines colliding, the one where he had left, and the one where she had imagined in her weakest moments that he had not. She pressed her teeth together and looked at the sky, and stayed standing. The swing rose. Iris laughed, and in Nora's chest the sealed thing cracked a little further open, letting in light she was not ready for. The park visit lasted 47 minutes. Iris exhausted the swing. Then the pigeon she had decided was interesting. Then the frozen fountain and the question of whether the fish inside were cold and whether fish got cold the same way people did. Rowan answered every question without the exaggerated brightness of an adult performing enthusiasm for a child. He answered straight and seriously, like the questions deserved actual consideration, which they did, because Iris was not a child who asked things she did not mean. When it was over, Nora touched her daughter's shoulder and said they were leaving. Iris looked at Rowan. "Will you come next time?" Rowan glanced at Nora. Nora kept her face neutral. "We will see," he said. "Not a promise." The decision left where it belonged. Nora noted that and set it somewhere. They walked out of the park and parted at the gate. Nora and Iris heading left toward home. Rowan heading in the other direction, toward wherever Rowan Hale went on Sunday mornings with no security and no armor, which she suspected was nowhere he was entirely comfortable. "I like him," Iris announced as soon as he was out of earshot. "I know," Nora said. "He listened to the whole pigeon story. Most people do not do that." "No," Nora said. "They do not." She held Iris's hand and walked and tried not to think about the way Rowan had looked. When Iris said goodbye, the way he had stood very still and watched them walk away with his hands back in his pockets. She had made herself not look back. She kept that decision all the way to the door of her building, and then she broke it for 1 second on the front step. He was still standing at the gate. She went inside. At 7:15 that evening, after Iris was in bed, her phone buzzed. "Thank you for Sunday." She sat with the text for a long moment. Then she typed back, "She liked you. Do not make her regret it." His response came in under a minute. "I won't." She plugged in her phone and went to bed and lay on her back in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about nothing in particular and everything simultaneously, which was the kind of sleeplessness that had no solution. He called on Tuesday. She had said to text, but it was a call, and she answered because Iris was at daycare, and she was between the morning shift and an errand, and she had about 30 seconds of bandwidth before the next obligation arrived. "I said text," she said instead of hello. "I know." A pause. "I wanted to hear your voice." "Nora." She stopped on the sidewalk, stepped out of the foot traffic, put her back against a building. "What?" "I want to help." The directness of it was almost startling. No preamble, no softening. "With Iris, with the money situation. I know what the inside of your apartment looks like. You looked at my bills. They were on the counter. I was not searching. I noticed things quickly. There was no apology in it, which was both irritating and consistent. The heat has been going out. You have a daycare invoice on the fridge. You are doing this alone, and you do not have to." Her jaw was tight. "I have been doing it alone for 4 years. I know. Do not say it like that. Like it means something to you now. Like you get to have feelings about 4 years of something you chose to absent yourself from." The silence on the line was different from the silences in person. She could hear his breathing, slow, controlled, the way he breathed when he was choosing every word. "I am not going to argue with you about what I deserve to feel," he said finally. "I am asking to help. Whatever Iris needs specifically, I want to do that. I am not taking your money. I did not say for you. I said for Iris." She pressed 2 fingers against her forehead and looked at the sidewalk. "We will talk about it," she said. "Not now. Later." "Okay." "And Rowan." She waited. "Do not call again." "Text. If I want to have a conversation, I will start it." Another pause. Then, "Okay." She hung up and stood on the sidewalk in the cold and breathed for a moment, then went and did her errand and went back to work and did not look at her phone for 2 hours. The problem with Rowan reappearing was that he did not do it halfway. She should have anticipated this. She had watched him at Ashford House, watched how he occupied a room, how the men around him organized themselves, without being told how his presence changed the acoustic quality of any space he entered. Rowan had never been a partial person. At 20, the things he felt completely, and the things he decided without revision. She had simply not understood what direction he was pointed in. By the second week, there was a car. Just a message Tuesday morning. I arranged a car for you and Iris in the mornings for the daycare run. The driver's name is Ellis. He will be there at 7:45. You do not have to use it. She stared at the message for a long time. She used it that morning because it was below freezing, and Iris had a cold that had not fully cleared, and the bus had been late 3 times that week. Ellis was a compact, quiet man in his late 50s who handed Iris a small paper bag with 2 crackers in it when she got in the car. Thought she might want a snack, he said, and that was the full extent of their conversation. She told herself it was temporary, just until the weather broke. By the end of the second week, she had used it every morning and twice in the evenings. She called Rowan on Friday. The car, she said. What about it? It is too much. It is a car, Nora. It takes you to daycare. She pushed the frustration down to where it could be examined rather than detonated. Every time you do something without asking, it changes the shape of my life without my permission. Do you understand that? Yes. I wanted to help, and I moved faster than I should have. I will ask before I do things, not just ask. Wait for me to say yes. Okay. And Ellis is staying, Iris said from the other room, loud enough to carry. Nora closed her eyes. She was not supposed to hear that. Rowan said nothing, but she could hear the shape of something that was not quite amusement, but was close to it. This is not funny, Nora said. I know. He paused. Can I take the 2 of you to dinner? Somewhere normal? I will text you the place first, so you can decide. No cars, no men, just us. Text me the place, she said. I will decide. The place was a Ukrainian diner on the east side. Booths with red vinyl, laminated menus, the kind of overhead lighting that did not flatter anyone, which she approved of precisely because it was nothing like Ashford House. No theater, no strategic warmth, just a diner. Rowan was already there when they arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a laminated menu and a cup of black coffee, wearing a dark gray sweater and no jacket, no suit. And Nora registered the difference it made to see him without the armor, before she could decide not to register it. Iris climbed into the booth immediately and announced she wanted pancakes, which were not on the dinner menu. The waitress, a woman in her 50s, named B, according to her name tag, went to the kitchen and came back to say that pancakes could be arranged. Iris accepted this as her natural due. I like this place, she said. Good, Rowan said. Iris turned her attention to the small cup of crayons B had produced and began to draw on the paper placemat with the focused intensity she brought to all creative work. Rowan watched her. Nora watched Rowan watch her and pressed her thumbnail into her palm under the table. They ordered food. Rowan ate without commentary on its quality, which she noted. At some point during the meal, after the food came and Iris was occupied with her drawing, Rowan set down his fork and looked at Nora directly. "I need to talk to you about something," he said, "and I need you not to react before I finish. When someone says that she said the thing they are about to say always justifies the reaction." "Probably." He held her gaze. "I want to put Iris in a better daycare." "She is in a fine daycare. The facility has a structural violation on the city inspection record from last year. The heat in the back room where she naps does not work properly. 3 weeks ago, a child left the building unescorted for 4 minutes before staff noticed. The quiet at the table was the kind that had mass." "How do you know that?" Nora said. Her voice was level, which cost her something. "Because I looked into it. You investigated her daycare without telling me." "Yes." Nora leaned forward slightly and kept her voice below the ambient noise of the diner. "You cannot do that. You do not get to investigate my choices as a parent without telling me. You have been in her life for 2 weeks. I have been her father for 4 years," he said. "I am just the only one who did not know it." The sentence hit with a precision she had not been braced for. Not cruel, just honest, in the way that honesty sometimes functions as a blade. She sat with it for a moment. "You do not get to use that," she said quietly. "You do not get to flip the accountability the minute it is inconvenient for you. I am not flipping it." His jaw was tight. "I am saying that regardless of how we got here, she is mine, and I want her somewhere safe. I will pay for it. You pick the facility. I will not go near it without your permission." Nora looked at Iris, who was drawing what appeared to be a horse, but might have been a very ambitious dog, entirely absorbed. Then she looked at Rowan. "I will find a better daycare myself," she said. "I will look into options, and I will choose one, and I will tell you which one it is. You do not pick it. You do not make calls. You do not send anyone to look at it before I have decided." "Okay." And Rowan. She waited until she had his complete attention. "If you ever investigate something about my life or Iris's life without telling me first, I will take her, and I will move, and I will not leave a forwarding address. I do not care what resources you have. I have been invisible before. I know how to do it." She said it quietly. She meant every word of it. He could hear that she meant it. She watched it register. "Understood," he said. They finished dinner. Iris ate her pancakes, which arrived with a small ceremony from B. She showed Rowan her drawing and explained that it was a horse with a special power, the nature of which kept evolving during the explanation. Rowan listened with complete attention and asked 2 follow-up questions that Iris had not expected and that therefore delighted her enormously. The late call started by accident. She was at her kitchen table at 11 on a Wednesday, with the bills spread out in front of her, doing the monthly arithmetic, where you delayed one thing to cover another, and rotated the delays in a cycle that worked until it didn't. She had a new daycare selected, Meadowbrook Learning Center, spotless inspection. Record. A waiting list she had gotten onto 6 months ago and which had finally called with an opening. The copay after assistance was $40 more per week than the current arrangement. She did the math 4 times. At 11:20, without fully deciding to, she picked up her phone and texted, "How do child care subsidies work if someone wants to contribute without affecting my assistance tier?" His response came in under 2 minutes. "Call me." She did. "You are up late," she said when he answered. "I am always up late. Tell me the situation." She told him. The numbers, the assistance tier, the $40 gap. She told him plainly because she was tired and there was no performance left in her at this hour. He listened without interrupting, which was something she had remembered about him, that he listened completely without the half-listening of someone formulating their response. There is a way to structure it that does not touch your assistance calculation, he said. A direct payment to the facility. It reads as a third-party benefactor contribution. Your tier stays the same. Your lawyer can review the arrangement. I do not have a lawyer. You will have one by tomorrow. Rowan. I will send you 3 names in the morning. You choose. You review everything. If you do not like it, we do not do it. She sat on the couch with the bills around her and looked at the ceiling and felt the vertigo of a person who has been doing something alone for so long that any form of help feels like an ambush. You are very good at this, she said. At what? Finding the door that does not look like a door. A pause. I am not trying to trap you. I know. And she did know. That was the complicated part. That does not mean it is not happening. Tell me what to do differently. His voice was even. Tell me where the line is, and I will stay behind it. The line keeps moving because you keep finding the gaps in it, because every gap is a real problem I can fix. I know what you can fix, she said. And that is the problem. You can look at my life and fix every broken thing in it, and it will feel like being saved. And I will not be able to tell the difference between being helped and being absorbed, being reorganized, until I am living in something you built without me making any of the decisions that matter. The silence on the line stretched. She could hear him breathing. I hear you, he said finally. She looked at the dark window, at the city lights beyond it, the snow that had started again while they were talking. I do not know what right looks like with you, she said honestly. I do not think I ever have. Okay, he said. Then we figure it out. They stayed on the call for another hour, talking the way they used to in the truck on the hood, under the lights when the world had been smaller, and neither of them knew what was coming. He told her about the years he disappeared, not all of it, not the worst of it, but enough. His Uncle Carmine's death, the 18 months of violence that followed, the understanding he arrived at that people near him developed a specific vulnerability and what that understanding had cost him. She did not absolve him. He was not asking for absolution. She told him about Iris's first year, the apartment smaller than the current one, the 3 jobs she worked simultaneously in the first 6 months, the exhaustion of being a new mother alone at 19, a kind of exhaustion she had never spoken about to anyone because there was no one to speak to about it. Rowan was very quiet when she said that. She heard it in his breathing, the weight he was carrying it with. "I am sorry," he said. "I know." She believed it. That was the complicated part. It does not fix anything. "No, but I believe you," she said, "for whatever that is worth." They got off the call near 1 in the morning. Nora put the bills in their folder and turned off the kitchen light. She thought about Rowan and about the space between the life she had built and the one that was now pressing against its edges, about the sealed thing in her chest that had been cracking since the night at Ashford House, about how much longer she could hold the line between letting someone in and losing the shape of herself she had spent 4 years building from nothing. She went to bed. Outside the window, the snow fell on a city that knew nothing about any of this and would have been indifferent if it had. The invitation arrived on a Thursday morning, hand-delivered to Ashford House before her shift in an envelope addressed in print rather than cursive, clean, and direct the way Rowan did everything. Inside were 2 cards. The first was printed with a gold border. Hargrove Children's Foundation Benefit Gala, Saturday, 7 o'clock, Meridian Tower, 42nd floor. The second was handwritten in the same spare print. "I have to attend this. I would like you to come with me. I know what I am asking. You can say no." She read both cards twice. Then she went to the floor manager and asked for Saturday off. He looked at her, and she looked back, and he looked away first and said yes. She texted Rowan, "Saturday. I need a dress." His response came back in under a minute. "I will take care of it," she typed back immediately. "I will pick it myself. Give me a number." A pause. Then a number that made her stop on the sidewalk and look at her phone for a long moment. Generous enough that she could pick something real without compromise. She called her college friend, Daria, who worked at a boutique and knew things, and Daria talked her through 3 options. And Nora ordered a black velvet dress online at 10 that evening. Saturday she tried it on in the bathroom mirror. It was not the kind of dress she owned. She owned practical things, things that washed easily, things that lasted. This was a different category of object entirely. A dress that expected something of the person wearing it. She looked at herself for a long time. She looked like a woman who had decided something. She was not sure what she had decided, but there it was. She left Iris with Mrs. Halverson. The car came at 6:30. Ellis, who gave her a professional nod and opened the rear door without comment. Rowan was inside. The sight of him in the amber light of the back seat in a dark suit was something she had to absorb in segments, the way you absorb things that are too much to take in directly. He looked at her for a moment before saying anything. "You look," he started. "Just tell me what tonight is," she said, getting in. He told her during the drive. The Hargrove Foundation, legitimate and well-regarded children's services. The event attended by 300 people, city figures, financial sector, several politicians. The reason he had to be there was business alliances, the maintenance of a public face that kept certain investigations pointed elsewhere. "Who else will be there?" she said. "People who know what I am and pretend they do not." His voice was even. "People who need something from me, people I need something from, and me, you." He glanced at her. You are there because I wanted you there. That is the truth of it. And there is another truth. He looked at her directly. Being seen with someone outside the architecture sends a message to specific people. Someone like me, she repeated. Someone who is not part of the business. He paused. Men in my position bring women to these events who are part of the structure. You are outside it. It means something different. It means you are using me. It means I wanted you there. And the context has political dimensions I am being honest with you about. His jaw was tight. I could have not told you. I am telling you. She sat with that. Outside the window, Midtown scrolled past in its Saturday evening density, the lights and traffic, and the human compression of Manhattan at 7 on a weekend. If I had known what you were 5 years ago, she said, would you have told me then? A long pause. I did not know what I was. Then he said, not completely. And now you do? Yes. She looked at the city going past. Then at least we are starting from something honest. The car stopped at Meridian Tower. Rowan got out first and came around and opened her door himself, ahead of Ellis, and held out his hand. She looked at it for half a second. Then she took it. They walked in together. The 42nd floor was exactly what she had expected, and nothing she had prepared for. 300 people in a space designed to make 300 people feel like the most important collection of humans on Earth. Floor-to-ceiling windows with the city spread below like a map of everything that was possible. Crystal everywhere. The low orchestral murmur of people performing their best versions of themselves. Waiters circled with the champagne that Nora took and held without drinking because she wanted her thinking clear. Rowan moved through the room with the ease of someone who knew exactly how much space he was entitled to, and never took more than that which paradoxically was more commanding than someone who crowded. People came to him. He received them with the brief warmth of a man who managed being known with complete efficiency. He introduced her simply each time. Nora. No last name, no context. Something about the simplicity of it made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. She spoke with a city councilman's wife about early childhood education, funding a topic she knew something about from the inside rather than the theoretical, and the woman seemed surprised, and then genuinely interested, and the conversation lasted 12 minutes, and was unexpectedly grounding, like finding solid floor in an otherwise unsteady room. Rowan came back to her side. He handed her a glass of sparkling water without being asked, which meant he had noticed she had not touched the champagne. She took it. You are good at this, he said quietly, watching the room. I have been a server for 3 years. Reading rooms is a survival skill. It is more than that. She did not respond to that. They stood together at the window, with the city below them, and she let herself have 30 seconds of something that was not entirely weariness. The view, the height, the feeling of standing above everything familiar at a sufficient distance to see its shape. That was when she saw the woman. She came from the left side of the room, tall, dark-haired, in a red dress that had clearly been chosen as a statement and worn the way people wore statements with full awareness of its effect and no apology for it. She moved toward Rowan with the ease of deep familiarity which registered in Nora's chest before her brain had time to analyze the signal. "Rowan," the woman said. Her voice was low and precise, her accent somewhere Central European and polished smooth by years in international rooms. She kissed his cheek. The gesture was proprietary in a way that did not ask permission, because it had decided permission was not required. "Vivian," Rowan said. His voice was neutral, not cold, not warm, precisely neutral. "I did not know you were bringing company. This is Nora." Vivian extended her hand and looked at Nora with the assessment of a person determining a threat level and finding the exercise more interesting than expected. "How do you know Rowan?" "Old friends," Nora said. "How lovely." The smile was perfectly pleasant and entirely without warmth. "Old friends can be so important." She looked at Rowan. "We should speak later. There are things to discuss." "Later," Rowan said. Vivian moved away into the room. Nora watched her go, not with the attention of jealousy, with something cooler and more precise. She was watching the way Vivian moved the direction her eyes went when she was not speaking directly to someone, the angle of her attention when she thought no one was looking at her face. It was not the way a former partner looked at someone they had history with, not rivalry, not the complex residue of a finished affair. It was the way someone looked at a person they were managing a specific outcome around. Like she already knew something about tonight and was watching to see if it was going to land correctly. Nora held that observation in the back of her mind and said nothing. The evening moved. She watched Rowan work the room with the efficiency of someone conducting necessary business while making it look like pleasure. She watched Vivian on the other side of the room, talking to two men Nora did not recognize, and she watched the quality of attention Vivian gave the entrance every few minutes, like she was timing something. Then the gunshots started. They came from the direction of the main entrance. Not close, not yet, but close enough to be unmistakably what they were. The first one froze the room for exactly 1 second, the collective human instinct to disbelieve competing with the evidence of the ears. Then the second came, and the room broke apart, screaming, tables overturning, champagne glasses shattering on marble as people dove and ran. The orchestra went silent mid-measure, and the silence it left was immediately filled with the sound of 300 people who were afraid. Rowan's arm was around Nora before the third shot, pulling her into his body, one hand at the back of her head. Around them, 4 men she recognized from Ashford House materialized from different corners of the room. They had been here all evening. She had not registered a single one of them. They were moving now with coordination clearing, directing, communicating in clipped half-sentences, while the amber lighting flickered once and then the emergency system took over, white and hard and without warmth. In that light, she saw Rowan's face from 4 inches away. She had never seen this expression before. Calm at its deepest possible level, the calm of a person whose training had completely overridden emotional response, leaving only function, a face that was all decision. "Stay behind me," he said. "Do not stop moving. Stay low." She stayed behind him. She stayed low. The room was filling with something acrid, a chemical deployed near the entrance that caught in the back of the throat. People were everywhere, ducked behind overturned tables, running toward the emergency exits at the far end of the hall, some standing in apparent paralysis, while others streamed past them. She heard something happen behind her, a short, ugly sound she knew instinctively was violent, in the way you know things outside your experience, registering in the base of the skull before conscious thought catches up. She did not turn to look. Rowan's hand at her back kept her moving forward and then sideways toward the south end of the ballroom, where two of his men had established a position behind a toppled service table. Rowan put her against the wall, cold marble against her bare shoulder blades through the black velvet dress she had bought to wear to this, and the absurdity of that was so complete she almost laughed, would have laughed if every function of her body was not occupied with keeping her heart inside her chest. A man came around the left side of the table. He was not one of Rowan's men. He moved with the same controlled speed that Rowan's men moved, with the same dead-focused expression. Not the panic of a guest caught in crossfire, but something with a direction and a target. His eyes went to Rowan. Rowan stepped out from behind the table. The man raised something. Rowan was faster. What happened in the next 12 seconds? Nora processed the way the mind processes extreme events in fragments, in peripheral flashes, the editing of perception under extreme adrenaline. What she understood from those fragments was that Rowan fought with an efficiency and a physicality that had nothing theatrical about it. Brutally functional, the application of complete force toward a specific outcome in the fastest available time. The man went down. Rowan turned back to her immediately. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No." Her voice was steadier than she had any right to expect. He looked at her in one complete sweep, and when he confirmed she was undamaged, something shifted in his expression. He crossed to her. A cut above his right cheekbone had opened, already beginning to bead. He seemed unaware of it. "I need to take you somewhere," he said, "safe. And I need to explain some things when we get there. Things I should have told you before tonight." "How bad?" she said. He held her gaze. "Bad enough that after you hear them, you are going to want to leave." She looked at him in the white emergency lighting, with the screaming room and the sirens rising somewhere below them, and said, "Then tell me now. Right now, Rowan, before I walk out of this room with you, I need to know what I am walking into." He looked at her. He took one breath, and he began. He told her in the parking garage they reached through a service stairwell while his men secured the exits above. The garage was cold and smelled like concrete and exhaust. Her dress was wrong for this place. Everything about the last 2 hours had been wrong for everything that came before it. He told her about Carmine Hale, his uncle, who had run the Eastern distribution networks for 15 years before his death, which had not been natural. He told her about the succession, the 18 months of violence, the position he had not entirely sought, but had been structurally incapable of refusing. He told her about the businesses, the shipping companies, the construction subsidiaries, legitimate operations that also functioned as infrastructure for things that were not. He told her about the Korvath Syndicate. That name was the hinge on which everything else turned, a criminal organization operating out of Central Europe with significant American reach. Financial fraud, trafficking the movement of people and product through ports that Rowan's network nominally controlled. For 3 years, they had been trying to acquire those ports through negotiation. He had declined. The negotiation had become, in the past 8 months, something considerably less civil. "The shooting tonight," Nora said. Her voice was flat. "Korvath," he said, or someone aligned with them. They escalated. A public event was meant to send a message. What message? That there is no safe ground. He held her gaze. That anywhere I go, anyone near me becomes. She completed it. A target. Yes. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth for a moment, not to stop sound. But something was happening in her chest that needed containment while she thought. "And you knew this," she said, "before Ashford House, before the park, before Iris held your hand in the snow. I knew the general climate," he said. "I did not know they would move on a public event. That is not what I asked." His silence confirmed what his silence always confirmed, that she had asked exactly the right question. "You brought yourself back into my life, knowing that contact with you carries this specific risk," she said. "You let Iris know you. She told you about the pigeon. She asked if you would come back, and you were already. I thought I had more time before they escalated this far. That is not a defense." "I know. That is not a defense," she said again, and her voice came up slightly, and one of his men at the far end of the garage turned at the sound. She looked at the man until he turned back around. Rowan stood in front of her and absorbed it. He did not reach for the justifications that were technically available. He stood there and let her say what needed to be said. "What happens now?" she said. Her voice had come back down. "I get you and Iris somewhere safe before morning. There are properties not connected to my name. Secure. You stay there until this is resolved." "Until what is resolved?" "Until Korvath is no longer a functional organization." The statement hung in the cold garage air. "How do you resolve that?" she said. He looked at her. She looked back. She was 23 years old, in a black velvet dress in a parking garage at midnight. And she already knew the answer, and she needed to hear him say it anyway. "The way these things get resolved," he said. She closed her eyes for 3 seconds, opened them. "Tell me about the safe house." It was not a house. It was an apartment on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown, whose ownership ran through 4 shell companies to a name that had no connection to Rowan Hale in any system that existed. 3 bedrooms, security cameras on every floor, 2 of his men in the adjacent apartment. They picked up Iris at 2:40 in the morning. Nora called Mrs. Halverson from the car in the careful voice she used when she needed to convey urgency without content. Mrs. Halverson had Iris dressed, and at the door by the time they arrived and asked only one question. "Is she safe?" "Yes," Nora said. "She will be." Iris was half asleep, confused in the blameless way of children pulled from their beds at hours that made no sense. She saw Rowan in the car and reached for him with the unself-conscious directness of a child who had decided he was trustworthy. Rowan took her and held her against his chest and looked at Nora over the top of Iris's dark hair with an expression made of every complicated thing simultaneously. Nora looked away. She watched the city through the window until they arrived. She put Iris to bed in the room that had been prepared. Sheets crisp and tight, a lamp with a warm bulb, a stuffed bear on the pillow that was not Iris's bear but was acceptable. Iris asked 2 questions, both sleepy and not requiring real answers, and was asleep before Nora finished the second one. She came back to the main room. Rowan was standing at the window. His jacket was off. The cut above his cheekbone had been cleaned, a thin line of dried blood at his collar. He turned when she came in. "She is down," Nora said. "Good." He paused. "You should try to sleep." "I am not going to sleep." "I know." He looked at her. "Sit down, please." She sat because she was tired in a way that had moved past the kind that kept you standing. She sat on the couch and took her heels off and set them beside her feet and pressed one hand across her face. Rowan came and sat in the chair across from her, not beside her, giving her the distance that his instinct correctly identified as what she needed right now. "Tell me about Vivian," she said. She had been carrying that name since the ballroom, the red dress, the proprietary kiss, the quality of attention. Vivian gave the entrance all evening, like she was timing an arrival. Rowan's expression did not shift. "That is what you want to talk about right now, among other things." He leaned back, touched 2 fingers to his mouth, briefly. The thinking posture. She remembered it from years ago. "Vivian runs a financial network based in Geneva. We have had arrangements, primarily business. There was a period." He said it carefully. "It ended 18 months ago. Did she know that?" He paused. "She had a different understanding of how it ended than I did, meaning she thought it was not over and you thought it was, something like that." Nora looked at him. "Is she Corvath aligned?" The question surprised him. She could see it do that a fractional shift in an otherwise composed face. He sat forward. "What makes you ask that?" "The way she looked at you when you came in tonight," Nora said. "It was not the way a former partner looks at someone they have history with. It was the way someone looks at a person they are managing a specific outcome around. Like she already knew something about tonight was coming." She held his gaze. "Am I wrong?" Rowan was very still. "We have had her looked at," he said. "Nothing definitive. Peripheral connections. Nothing that proved active cooperation, but not nothing." He stood and went to the window. "If Vivian had operational knowledge of tonight," Nora said, "then she knew when you walked in with me that the shooting was coming. She knew, and she stood there in her red dress and kissed your cheek." Rowan put one hand against the window glass and stood with his back to her and breathed. "I need to make a call," he said. "Make it." She did not sleep until nearly 5 in the morning. She lay on the bed in the second room with the door open so she could hear Iris, and stared at the ceiling and thought in the circular, grinding way you think when exhaustion has broken down linear processing. She thought about Vivian's eyes when she first walked toward Rowan and what was and was not in them. She thought about Rowan in the garage, telling her the truth without softening it. She thought about the 12 seconds in the ballroom and what it meant that the most honest thing she had ever seen him do was also the most violent. She fell asleep with these thoughts unresolved. Her phone rang at 7:20, a number she did not recognize. She answered without thinking, the reflex of someone who answered every call, in case it was daycare, in case it was the building, in case it was anything, requiring immediate response. Ms. Voss. The voice was male, professional, not threatening, which was somehow more unsettling than threatening would have been. My name is Agent Marcus Rourke, Federal Task Force Organized Crime Division. I apologize for the hour. Your number came up as a witness in last night's incident at Meridian Tower. I would like to speak with you. About what specifically? About Rowan Hale. A pause. And about what you may know regarding his operations. Nora sat up. She listened for Iris. She could hear the small, even breathing from the next room. Still asleep. I do not know anything about his operations, she said. Ms. Voss, we know you have been in contact with Hale for approximately 3 weeks. We know he has had a vehicle assigned to you, that there is accommodation arranged at this address, and that you were present with him at the Hargrove Gala last night during what we believe was a coordinated attack. A pause. We are not here to threaten you. We are concerned about your safety and your daughter's. Something went cold and precise in the center of her chest. How do you know about my daughter? We have been investigating the Hale network for 14 months, Rourke said. You and your daughter have come up in that investigation. His voice was careful and even. I will be direct with you. What happened last night is going to escalate. The people behind the Meridian attack are not going to stop. And the people who remain close to Rowan Hale in the next several weeks are going to be caught in something that has no clean edges. What do you want from me? A conversation. Nothing you say has to go anywhere you do not want it to go. We can meet somewhere of your choosing. You can have a lawyer present. I just need you to understand the full situation before you make decisions about how close to this you are willing to stay. I will think about it, she said. Ms. Voss, I will think about it. She kept her voice level. Do not call this number again. I will contact you. She hung up and sat in the unfamiliar room and pressed both palms flat against her knees and thought. Then she got up and went to the kitchen and made coffee and stood at the counter and drank half a cup and made a decision. She knocked on Rowan's door. He answered immediately, which meant he had not slept either. He was in the shirt from last night, untucked, no jacket. He looked at her face. What happened? He said. Someone called me. She watched his expression carefully. Federal Task Force, Organized Crime. He knew my name. This address. He paused at the right moment and said he knew about Iris. Something moved across Rowan's face in rapid sequence. Threat assessment. Then something harder. Then control reasserting itself. He stepped back from the door. "Come in." She came in. He closed the door. "Rourke," he said. "You know him." "I know the task force." He picked up his phone and typed something. "They have been building for over a year. They do not have enough to move. Not yet." He looked up. What did he say? She told him, word for word. She had the kind of memory that anxiety sharpened rather than blurred, and she repeated the conversation back with the precision of a transcript. Rowan listened without moving. When she finished, the silence in the room was the densest it had been since the garage. "He is right," Rowan said. She looked at him. "About the escalation." He set the phone down. "This is not going to slow down, not quickly." He looked at her directly. "Nora, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you respond. Say it." "I am going to give you the option I should have given you the night at Ashford House." He held her gaze. "I can put you and Iris somewhere completely disconnected from me. New documentation, new city, enough money that you never have to work 2 jobs again. Iris never knows any of this happened. You rebuild clean." He paused. "That is a real option, and it is on the table with no conditions on it." She looked at him for a long moment. "And the other option. You stay. You know everything. You make informed choices about what that means. Those are not equal options," she said. "No," he agreed. "They are not." She sat on the edge of the chair beside the window. Outside, the city was fully morning, now the gray-white sky of a December day. The city operating on its Saturday schedule, completely indifferent to everything that had happened since 7 o'clock the previous evening. "Tell me about the federal investigation," she said. "Not the summary. Everything," he told her. 14 months of accumulated surveillance, financial forensics, witness statements from individuals who had been offered agreements. The task force had 3 primary targets. Rowan, a man named Colfax who managed physical logistics, and a third name Rowan gave her last, Declan Marsh. She processed the name for 3 seconds. "Who is Declan Marsh?" "My second in command," Rowan said. "He has been with the operation for 9 years. He runs internal security." He paused. "He is the man who managed my personal protection for the past 3 years. The task force has him as a target." "Yes." "Have you asked him about it?" "Not directly." Rowan's voice was careful. "I am in the process of—" She looked at him. "Who else knew we were going to be at the Hargrove Gala last night?" The room went quiet in a different way. He looked at her. Something was happening behind his eyes, the expression of a person who has been approaching a conclusion they have been avoiding and can no longer locate a route around. "Declan coordinated the security plan for last night," Rowan said. His voice had gone flat. He knew the arrival time, the floor position, the entry route, every detail. "And Vivian," Nora said. Did Declan know Vivian? The silence that followed was total. Rowan turned and walked to the window and stood there, both hands at his sides, looking at the city below. She could see the tension in his shoulders from across the room, the stillness of a man processing a betrayal that has just crystallized from suspicion into near certainty. 9 years, he said. Not to her exactly, but not needing a response. "I am sorry," she said. He turned around. His face had resolved into something she had not seen before. Not the controlled performance, not the unguarded grief. Something beneath both of those, something very cold and very quiet. "Where is the agent's number?" he said. "I do not have it. He called from an unregistered number. He will call back." Rowan looked at her. "When he does tell him you want to meet, tell him you have information. Do not tell him what information." She looked at him. "You want me to meet with federal agents. I want you to be in a room that is not mine when this goes sideways." His voice was precise. "Because it is going to go sideways, and I need you somewhere defensible. I am not going to be your insurance policy. I am not asking you to be." He crossed the room and crouched in front of her eye level, close enough that she could see the cut above his cheekbone and the shadow under his eyes, and all the things the suit usually managed to conceal. "I am asking you to protect yourself and Iris, using every available option. That includes Rourke. That includes whatever the task force has. I am not asking you to give them anything. I am asking you to have a lifeline that does not run entirely through me." She looked at him in the morning light from the window and saw all of it at once. The man she had known at 18. The man he had become. The father Iris had already decided she wanted. The dangerous thing at the center of a dangerous world that had its own gravity and was pulling everything she had carefully built toward its event horizon. "Okay," she said. He held her gaze for another moment. Then he stood. She stood too. They were standing close enough that she could hear him breathing. The distance between them was the kind that had a decision embedded in it about whether to reduce it or hold it, and she was tired enough that her defenses were operating below their usual efficiency. "Rowan," she started. "Don't," he said. She stopped. "What?" "Don't say whatever you were going to say." His voice was low. "Not right now. There are things happening, and I need to think clearly. And if you say something—" He stopped. His jaw worked. "Just not right now." She looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said. Different meaning than the last time she had said it. She went back to her room. Rourke called back at 11:40. She stepped into the hallway outside the apartment to take it. Not because Rowan would have stopped her, because some conversations required walls between them. "I will meet with you," she said when Rourke answered. "Today, not in a federal building. A coffee shop, somewhere public." No hesitation on his end. He had been expecting her call. "That works. I will send you an address." "And Rourke." She kept her voice low. "I want full immunity before I say anything. Not for Rowan, for me and my daughter. Everything I say, everything I know, nothing touches us." A pause. "I will need to confirm that. Confirm it before we meet, or we do not meet." She paused. "You called me because you think I am useful. I am telling you the terms of useful." A longer pause. "I will have the paperwork ready in 2 hours," Rourke said. She went back inside. Rowan was in the main room with 2 men she did not know speaking in low, rapid sentences. He looked up when she came in. She held his gaze for a moment, and then went to the kitchen and poured herself more coffee and said nothing, and he said nothing, and that was for the moment enough. Iris woke at 12:15 and appeared in the kitchen doorway with the bear hat pulled over her sleep-wild hair and her feet bare on the floor, and announced that she was hungry and also that she wanted pancakes with the circles, the blueberry kind. Nora looked at her daughter in the doorway of a safe house she had not chosen, and felt the grounding weight of a problem she could actually solve. "We will find you pancakes," she said, "the good kind Iris specified, with the circles." "Yes, blueberry." Iris nodded gravely. Rowan appeared from the main room and looked at Iris with the expression he always got around her, the one that bypassed all the layers. Iris saw him, and her face did what it did with people she had decided she trusted. It opened completely. "Rowan," she said, "are you having pancakes too?" He glanced at Nora. Nora looked at the floor for a moment, then at Iris, then briefly at Rowan. "3 orders," she said. The coffee shop Rourke had chosen was on 47th, a corner place with good sight lines and the kind of busy Saturday midday foot traffic that made private conversation easy. She left Iris with Rowan a decision that cost her something to make, and that she made anyway, because Iris had asked specifically, and without negotiation, for Rowan to stay, and had taken his hand and pulled him toward the window where she had spotted a dog on the sidewalk below. Nora watched her daughter lead a man who ran a criminal empire to a window to look at a stranger's dog, and she picked up her coat and left. She got to the coffee shop first. She chose a table by the window, ordered black coffee, and sat with her hands around the cup and thought about what she was about to do. Rourke came in at 1:12, younger than his voice had suggested, mid-30s, dark coat, the low-profile presentation of someone whose professional effectiveness depended on not being noticed. He sat across from her and set a folder on the table between them. "Ms. Voss." He slid it toward her, signed and witnessed. "You are protected." She opened it and read it carefully, all of it. What it said was what he had promised. She closed it. "Tell me what you need," she said. "Tell me what you know about Declan Marsh." She kept her face neutral. "Why Marsh, specifically?" "Because Marsh is the one we can use." Rourke leaned forward slightly, dropping his voice below the ambient noise of the room. "We have had 19 months on Hale, and he is meticulous. The financial structures are layered. The operational security is tight. We can build around the edges, but we cannot get to the center." He paused. "Marsh is different. Marsh has been feeding information to a third party for approximately 8 months. We believe Corvath aligned. He is not loyal to the organization. He is calculating his exit, and he has miscalculated the timeline." "How do you know this?" "Because last night's attack at the Hargrove Gala was coordinated using internal security schedules that only 3 people in the Hale organization had full access to: Rowan Hale, Declan Marsh, and a woman named Vivian Sorrell." Nora's hands were flat on the table. "Vivian Sorrell," she said. Her voice did not waver. "Vivienne Sorrell," Rourke said, "is Corvath." He let that sit for exactly 1 second. Not adjacent, not affiliated. Her legal name before she changed it in Geneva 11 years ago was Vivian Corvath. She is the operational director of the family organization, and she has been inside Rowan Hale's inner circle for 3 years. The coffee shop was warm. Nora was cold. He does not know, she said. We do not believe so. Rourke watched her. He trusted her. She had access to his financial structures, his security rotations, his personal relationships, including within 48 hours of his first contact with you at Ashford House. Information about you and your daughter. She kept breathing, kept her hands flat, kept her face doing its job. What do you need from me? She said. We need Marsh. Rourke sat back. He is scared. He knows Corvath is burning the operation from the inside, and he knows when the fire gets close enough, he is the first thing that gets thrown in. We believe if the right person approached him, someone he had no reason to see as a threat, someone with no obvious connection to the task force. You want me to approach him? You are a woman with a 4-year-old child who has been in Rowan Hale's orbit for 3 weeks. You are the least threatening person in this entire landscape. He looked at her steadily. You could ask Marsh a question and he would answer it. We need him to confirm one specific address, a property on Kessler Road, 40 minutes north of the city. We need it on record. She looked at him for a long time. Outside the window, the city moved through its Saturday in the indifferent way it always did. If I do this, she said, I need something in return, not for me, for Rowan. Rourke's expression shifted slightly. I know what you have, she said. I know the shape of the offer on your side of the table, and I know that without cooperation, you have circumstantial connections and financial forensics, but you do not have what you need to close it. She looked at him steadily. He will cooperate. Full financial disclosure. Complete testimony regarding the Corvath network. Testimony on subsidiary operations you have been building cases on for years. That is an enormous amount of value. Rourke was very still. You have been thinking about this for a long time, he said. Since before you called, she said. What I need in return is a negotiated outcome. No incarceration. Supervised transition, monitored but functional. He gives you everything you need to put Corvath away, and he walks away from this alive and present. Rourke looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat and produced a card, a direct number, and set it on the table. I will have a conversation with my supervisor, he said. She took the card. I will be in touch before tomorrow morning, she said. She stood. She left money on the table for the coffee. And Rourke. He looked up at her. When this is over, and the testimony is on record, I need him to be able to walk away from this. That is what I am buying with whatever I am about to do. Make sure your supervisor understands that. She walked out into the cold Saturday street and stood on the sidewalk with the card in her coat pocket and the weight of what she had just done settling into her bones. She had made a decision without bringing it to Rowan. She had made it on behalf of a man who would not have made it for himself. She had made it because Iris deserved a father who could be present without a security perimeter. Because the alternative was a world where Corvath burned everything from the inside, and Rowan went down in the wreckage, not even knowing which direction the fire had come from. She started walking back toward the safe house. 3 blocks from the coffee shop, her phone buzzed. She looked at it, expecting Rourke. It was a number she did not recognize. No name, just a text. 4 words. "We have the girl." The world stopped. Her vision went white at the edges. And then everything came back with a terrible, high-definition clarity. The street, the cold, the people walking past, with no awareness of anything, the phone in her hand, the 4 words that rearranged every internal organ she possessed into positions they were not built to occupy. She called Rowan. He answered on the first ring. Before he could speak, she said, "Where is Iris?" The silence on his end lasted 1 second. "She is." She heard him move, heard the sounds of the apartment, heard his voice go distant from the phone. "Ellis. Torres. Where is she?" And then further away, a door. And then a silence that had only one meaning. Nora was already running. She ran 6 blocks. Her heels were wrong for running, and she lost one on the 3rd block and kicked the other off without breaking stride, and ran on bare feet on December sidewalk, and felt nothing because the cold had no access to what was happening in the center of her chest. Rowan met her at the building entrance. He was already outside when she came around the corner. Coat on, phone in his hand, 2 men behind him, moving with the coordinated urgency of people who had been given a specific problem and were already computing solutions. His face when he saw her was the coldest thing she had ever seen on a human being. Not cold like cruelty. Cold like a person who has removed everything that is not functional, because functionality is the only available path to the outcome he needs. He took her by both arms when she reached him. "Are you hurt?" "I am fine." "What happened?" "Where?" "She was at the window," he said. Torres turned his back for 40 seconds to answer a call. His jaw worked. "The building has a service access on the north side. They came through it." 40 seconds, she said. "Yes." She pulled her arms free. "Where is Torres?" "Being dealt with. It means he has been removed from any further involvement." Rowan looked at her steadily. "Nora, I do not know where she is yet. I am working on it. I need you to come inside, and I need you to tell me everything Rourke said at the meeting." She went inside. The next 40 minutes happened at a pace her memory would later compress into something nonlinear. Not because she was absent from it, because the mind does something specific under sustained adrenaline. It prioritizes and discards in real time, keeps only what is load-bearing. She told Rowan everything. Rourke's words about Marsh feeding information for 8 months. The 3 people with full access to the Hargrove security schedules. The name Vivian Corvath and what it meant. 11 years in Geneva, 3 years inside. She told him the task force had known about Nora and Iris within 48 hours of the night at Ashford House. She watched it move through him the way extreme information moves through someone trained not to show it moving, the slight change in the rate of his breathing, the tension that traveled through his hands and settled in the flat of his palms pressed against the table, the stillness that came before a decision rather than after one. He turned to the men in the room and said one word. Vivian. One of them was already on his phone. He turned back to Nora. Marsh, he said, where does he think you stand? He does not know about the meeting with Rourke. She held his gaze. Nobody does except you. Good. He looked at her. I need you to call Marsh, not Rourke. Marsh, tell him you were at the safe house and you overheard something. Tell him you think I'm planning to move against him. Tell him you want to talk privately. She processed this. You want me to draw him out. I want to use you as a variable he has no category for. He will go somewhere when he moves, and where he goes will tell me where the Corvath people are running their current operation. He paused. You will be wired. 2 of my men within 40 seconds of wherever he wants to meet. You direct the conversation. She thought about Iris. She thought about the 4 words on her phone screen. She thought about 40 seconds at a window. Give me Marsh's number, she said. Marsh agreed to meet in under 2 minutes, which Rowan told her meant one of 2 things. Either he was frightened enough to reach for any offered line, or he was already moving and her call had been folded into a plan already in motion. Either way, movement was information. Either way, they would use it. The location Marsh proposed was a parking structure on 44th. 4 levels open on the top. Rowan did not like it. Too many exit points, he said. Then he said, take it anyway. She changed into clothes that had been in the apartment jeans and a sweater that were close enough to fitting. Rowan briefed her in the doorway of the room in the operational voice she had been learning to recognize, flat and specific, and without the layering of the private Rowan or the public one. He told her what to say. He told her Marsh would be scared, and that scared men listened for threats before they listened for content. He told her to let Marsh believe he was steering the conversation. He told her there was one question she needed to find an answer to the address on Kessler Road that had appeared on a cell tower trace connected to a communication through Marsh's phone 7 days ago. Why that address, she said. 3 weeks ago, I was approached about an acquisition through that property, presented as a shipping logistics operation looking for investment. He paused. Marsh was vetting the deal. The deal fell through. She looked at him. The deal fell through, he said again, and his voice had gone to a different register. And that property came back up in surveillance this week with significant new activity, construction equipment, generator installation, the kind of preparation you do for a short-term operational facility. They are holding her there, Nora said. It is the strongest current lead. His voice was careful. I need you to confirm it before I move. She was wired by a man who worked fast and without conversation, taping a small device to her ribs with the impersonal efficiency of someone for whom this was an ordinary task. She put the sweater back on and pressed her palm flat against her sternum, feeling the faint resistance of it beneath the fabric. Rowan handed her a phone. Clean number. If Marsh asks you called from this, she took it. He looked at her for another moment, the silence before she walked out. Nora, he said. Tell me when we have her back, she said. That is all. He held her gaze. Yes. Marsh was already on the third level of the parking structure when she arrived. He was shorter than she had expected, compact, with the physical density of someone who had been athletic once and had built something harder over it with the years. He was wearing a coat too light for the temperature and had the eyes of someone who had not slept in several days, burning with the anxiety of a person standing on a surface they have just realized is cracking beneath them. She walked toward him. His gaze went immediately to her hands, her waist, the space behind her. "You are alone," he said. "Yes." She stopped several feet from him. The wind on the open level of a parking structure in December was raw and without softening. She let it move through her. "How did you get my number?" "Rowan's phone." She held his gaze. "He left it on the counter. I took the number before he came back." Marsh looked at her for a long moment, assessing. She watched him decide she was plausible, which she was, because everything she was saying had the texture of something that could be true. "What did you hear?" he said. "Enough." She crossed her arms, the cold mostly, but Marsh would read it as something else. "He got a call this morning, before everything with." She let her voice roughen at the edges which required nothing from her at all. "Before the message about Iris. He was on for a long time and I heard your name." Marsh's jaw tightened. "He said you had made a mistake, that you had been sloppy about something, and it was going to create a problem." She paused. "And then he said he would handle it himself." The phrase landed exactly where she had aimed it. Marsh looked at the ground. His breathing had changed. He walked to the edge of the level and looked out at the city for a moment, then came back. "He is not going to handle it himself," Marsh said. He was talking as much to himself as to her. "I do not know what any of this is," Nora said. Her voice went smaller. "I know enough to know I am in the middle of something I was not built for. And I know that a man called me this morning who identified himself as a federal agent." Marsh's head came up. She held his gaze. "He said he was with the Organized Crime Task Force." She kept her voice even. "He knew about the internal security schedules for the Hargrove Gala. He knew about something called the Lattimore routing, and he knew about a property on Kessler Road." The name hit Marsh like something physical that reorganized the face without permission. The skin around his eyes went tight. His weight shifted back a half step. The instinctive rebalancing of a person whose floor has just dropped. "How does Rourke know about Kessler Road?" Marsh said. His voice was stripped down now, the performance register completely gone. "I do not know," she said, "but he was very specific about it." She looked at him. "What is there?" Marsh looked at her for a long time. "Where is Rowan right now?" "I do not know. I left while he was on calls." Marsh looked at her with an expression that held something of pity and something of warning. "Nothing you want to know about," he said. He walked past her toward the stairwell. She did not stop him. She stood at the edge of the parking level and waited until his footsteps faded, and then counted to 10 slowly, and turned and said to the wire beneath her sweater, barely above the wind, "Kessler Road." The earpiece crackled. Rowan's voice came through. I heard it. "Come back." The next 2 hours were the most organized thing she had ever watched. Rowan established a coordination point in the safe house apartment paper maps on the table because his people did not trust digital for time-critical operational planning. The property on Kessler Road, a former cold storage facility 40 minutes north of the city, accessed by a service road off the highway, surrounded by open ground on 3 sides and dense tree line on the 4th. 8 men called in over 90 minutes, each arriving separately, each briefed in the low, efficient language of people who had done this before. Nora sat at the kitchen table and watched and held herself together internally, in the way she had been holding herself together since the message arrived on her phone, the way that cost more with each passing hour. At 4:17, Rowan came to her. He sat across from her at the kitchen table. The apartment had gone quiet. Most of the men filtered out to their positions. 2 remained near the door at a distance that gave the kitchen the functional privacy of isolation. "Tell me what you need from me," she said. "You are not coming?" he said. She looked at him. "I need you here, in contact with Rourke. The task force needs to be held at a specific distance, not absent, not moving on the facility until I have been inside. If they hit it before I can get to her." He stopped. "I need Iris out before anyone with a badge comes through those doors." She heard the logic of it. She hated the logic of it. She sat with it. How long, she said. "I am inside by 6. She is out by 6:30 if everything goes correctly." She looked at the aerial image of the Kessler Road property that someone had printed and left on the table. The cold storage facility. The building where her daughter was because a man trusted for 9 years had been building his exit strategy on the vulnerability of a 4-year-old. "The north tree line," she said. Rowan looked at her. "If I am there," she said, "I am not going through the primary entry with your men. I will stay on the perimeter." She held his gaze. "I am not asking. I am telling you where I will be." The silence lasted 5 full seconds. "If something goes wrong," he said, "then something goes wrong while I am 40 feet from my daughter instead of 40 minutes away." She held his gaze without moving. He looked at her for a long moment, and the calculations ran out, and the thing underneath them took over. "North tree line," he said. "You stay there until I signal. Ellis will be with you." She nodded. He started to rise. She reached across the table and put her hand on his. He went still. "Bring her out," she said. He looked at her hand on his for a moment, then at her face. "Yes," he said. The drive north took 38 minutes. She sat in the back of the car with Ellis and said nothing, and watched the city give way to the gray-brown distance of the outer boroughs, and then to the bleakness of industrial highway corridor in December. Chain-link fencing, bare trees, structures sitting too far from everything to be comfortable. She did not build a picture of the inside of the Kessler Road facility. She had made that decision deliberately in the car. The picture would not help her, and it would cost her something she could not afford to spend. She thought about Iris in the park in the red coat legs, pumping on the good swing against the pale winter sky. She held that image and kept it in the front of her mind and left no room for the other one. Her phone showed a text from Rourke. "Task force staged at Route 9 junction. "We have the location. Give me a window." She typed back, 90 minutes. Do not move until I call. His response was immediate, holding. The facility appeared through the trees at dusk. The light had gone flat and gray and low, the quality of winter light at 5 in the afternoon that made everything look like the beginning of something that had not decided yet how bad it was going to be. The structure was larger than the aerial image had suggested. Two main buildings connected by a covered loading corridor, the heavy insulated cladding of the original cold storage infrastructure still visible in the walls. Floodlights at the exterior corners that were new. Rowan's convoy pulled off the service road half a mile before the facility. She got out, and the cold hit her raw and serious. The country cold that had nothing to buffer it. She stood on the gravel shoulder and let it settle into her, and felt something she did not have a word for resolve itself quietly into place. Rowan was 20 feet away, speaking to the assembled men in a voice too low to carry. She watched him among them, the authority that was not performed, the economy of instruction, the way they listened and reoriented. He came to her last. 90 minutes to Rourke, she said. He nodded. Rowan, she said it quietly. If Marsh is in there? I know. What are you going to do? He looked at her steadily. What needs to be done? She held his gaze and did not argue. There was no argument that functioned in this space, in this light, 40 feet from a building where Iris had been for 6 hours. Okay, she said. He looked at her for one more moment. Then he turned and moved, and the men went with him, and she went with Ellis into the tree line, threading through the frozen brush to the north position. She crouched in the cold with the bare branches above her and the facility wall ahead, and she waited. At 5:53, the lights inside the facility changed. She had been watching through a gap in the tree line for 50 minutes. The north wall had 2 high windows, frosted industrial glass, and for the first 50 minutes they had glowed a steady, flat white. At 5:53, the quality of the light shifted. Something moving in front of a light source, inside multiple things moving, and then a sound she felt before she heard, low and percussive, not consistent with ordinary facility noise. Ellis put a hand on her arm. She looked at his hand on her arm, and then at the facility wall, and then she was moving before anything else. Ellis was up immediately behind her, but she had the surprise of it. She had 6 hours of her daughter being inside that building, and she crossed the 40 feet of open ground to the north wall at a run and found the service door, and it was not locked, and she was inside. The corridor was cold storage, cold, the cold of a space that had spent years keeping things below temperature and still carried that function in its walls. Concrete floor, overhead, fluorescence doors at intervals. She pressed against the wall and listened. Voices from the east end. Something heavier from a door 30 feet ahead on the right. And underneath, both a sound she knew, small and brief and barely audible. But she had been listening for that frequency for 4 years in small hours, when she startled awake and checked, and she knew it before she had finished processing it. Iris crying. She moved to the door. It was secured with a physical locking bar, a design she had studied in the aerial image until she knew the hinge mechanism was on the outside, a security error, the kind of detail that meant nothing until it meant everything. She had 30 seconds before the voice she heard from the south corridor resolved into footsteps. The man who came around the south end had not been there when she arrived. He had emerged from somewhere she had not tracked and was looking at her with the expression of someone who has encountered something requiring rapid reclassification. He was large and had something in his right hand she clocked in her peripheral vision and did not look at directly. She looked past him at the south corridor and said the name loudly and clearly, Rowan. The man turned. She hit the door with her shoulder while reaching for the hinge mechanism simultaneously, and the bar unseated from its channel, rather than her forcing it, and the door came open, and she fell through it and scrambled to her feet. The room was the size of a large storage unit. 2 overhead work lights, one functioning, a folding chair, a cot, small the kind found in emergency shelters, water bottles sealed on the floor, a child's jacket she recognized immediately, red, slightly too large, bought a size ahead to extend the life of the purchase, and Iris. Iris was on the cot against the far wall, and she was looking at Nora with an expression that Nora would carry in her chest every remaining day of her life. Fear first, the deep animal fear of a child who has been genuinely frightened. And then, in the space of a single breath, the fear replaced completely by something else. Mama. Nora crossed the room on her knees and had her daughter in her arms before she had consciously finished moving, and held her face pressed into Iris's hair, one hand covering the back of her daughter's head, her body making itself into the only available barrier between Iris and everything outside that room. Iris was shaking. Nora was shaking. "I have got you," she said into the cold. "I have got you." "Mama." I was scared. "I know, baby." She sealed her voice immediately after it broke on the word. "I know. I have got you." Behind her the door. She turned her head. Rowan in the doorway, breathing hard, the cut above his cheekbone open again, with a thin line running down his jaw. He looked at them on the cot, at Iris, at Nora, at the arrangement of the 2 of them, which was every calculation he had ever made and every price he had ever paid, condensed into one small image. And his face did something she had never seen it do. The controlled expression gave way at its foundations. Something that had been held under sustained pressure for a very long time came to the surface all at once. His eyes went bright and wet, and his jaw set against it and failed. It lasted only a moment before he pulled himself back one hard breath, but she had seen it, and it was something she would not be able to unsee. "We need to move," he said. His voice was rough. "Can you walk?" he said to Iris. "Yes," Iris said, small and absolute. "Good girl." He crouched in front of her. "You hold my hand, and you do not let go." "Okay." He lifted her. She went against his chest and put her arms around his neck without hesitation, the same unself-conscious trust she had given him in the park in the snow. And Rowan held her with one arm and moved toward the door, and Nora was up and behind him, and they were moving. The corridor was no longer empty. 3 men at the north end, not Rowan's. She could tell immediately from the way they stopped when they saw him, rather than orienting to him. The east corridor had sounds moving toward them. Rowan turned south. At the turn, a figure stepped out. Not Marsh. Vivian Corvath. She was in a coat that was wrong for the setting, too clean, too composed for a woman who was supposed to be on a flight to Geneva. She was not supposed to be here. And yet here she was, which meant the flight had been scrubbed, and this facility had become her last remaining exit, and she had run straight into the one place Rowan's people were closing around. She looked at Nora with the cold curiosity of someone who had been watching her from a distance for weeks and was now seeing the original in person for the first time, taking inventory, running the final calculation. "You are not what I expected," Vivian said. Her voice was the same precise European register from the ballroom. Smaller in this light, more real. Nora said nothing. She looked at Vivian the way she looked at things that required complete attention and no performance, directly and without flinching. She looked at the woman who had known about Iris within 48 hours, who had stood in a ballroom and kissed Rowan's cheek while knowing what was coming, who had decided that a 4-year-old child was an acceptable variable in a business dispute. Rowan moved, not toward Vivian, past her because his men were already coming from the east corridor, already closing the space around her with the quiet efficiency of people who had been given one specific instruction and were following it. Vivian looked at Iris in Rowan's arms for 1 second, something running visibly behind her eyes, one final calculation that produced no viable output. She had no more moves, and she knew it. She was taken at the facility entrance, not at any airport, not off-screen, but here in the cold, in the dark, in front of both of them. Nora watched it happen. She did not feel satisfaction exactly. She felt something more like the closing of an account, the specific completion of something that had been open too long. Then they were outside. The cold hit like something clean, dark sky above with the first hard stars of the evening, the tree line ahead, the sound of Rowan's vehicles on the service road. Iris lifted her head from Rowan's shoulder. "We are outside," she announced. "Yeah," Rowan said. His voice was rough. "Are we going home now?" He looked at Nora. Nora looked at her daughter's face. The bear hat still somehow on her head, slightly crooked, the ears flattened from hours against the cot. Her eyes wide and dark and entirely present, the resilience of a child who has been frightened and has decided the worst part is over because the people she trusted have arrived. Those eyes, those impossible dark eyes that Nora had been looking at for 4 years. "Yes, baby," Nora said. "We are going home." From inside the facility behind them came a sound that was final and without ambiguity. A sound that meant a situation had reached its last available conclusion. She did not ask about it. She did not turn to look. She walked forward with Rowan beside her and Iris between them, and kept her eyes on the tree line and the road and the stars coming out above the burned-out evening sky. Rourke's task force came up the service road in a line of 4 vehicles. No sirens, just the sweep of headlights across the frozen ground. Rourke got out of the lead vehicle before it fully stopped. He looked at Rowan first, then at Nora, then at Iris, who had her face tucked against Nora's neck with her eyes half closed. "She is okay," Nora said. "She is okay," Rourke repeated. He looked at Rowan for a long moment. "We need to talk." "I know," Rowan said. "Tonight." "I know." Rourke turned to Nora. Something in his expression recalibrated. "You held them 90 minutes. I said I needed a window." He nodded once and went to his people. At the south end of the facility, Declan Marsh was sitting on the cold ground with his back against the wall and his hands in his lap, and his phone set face down beside him. Not running, not fighting, just sitting in the place he had arrived at. Rourke's agents approached him, and he stood without being told, and held out his wrists, and said nothing. Nora watched from across the frozen ground, and felt the weight of 9 years in the air. And then Ellis opened the car door, and she got in and held Iris against her chest, and the car started moving. The drive back to the city took 40 minutes. Iris fell asleep between them in the back seat, her head against Nora's arm, her breathing going slow and deep with the total ease of a child whose body has decided the emergency is finished. Rowan sat on the other side of her. Neither of them spoke for a long time. At some point on the highway, Rowan looked across at Nora. She was watching the dark median, the white lane markers passing in a steady rhythm. She could feel his gaze, but did not turn to meet it. Not yet. There was a correct order to things, and she was still working out what it was. After a while she said, without turning from the window, "When did you know about Vivian?" "Before the gala." A pause. "I had a suspicion," he said. "Not a certainty, not enough certainty. And you took me anyway. I wanted her where I could see her. If she was going to move, I wanted to know she was moving." A long pause. "I miscalculated the timeline." "You keep saying that because it is true," she said, "and it is also a way of saying you made a choice with incomplete information, and I lived with the consequences of that choice." Rowan was quiet. "Yes," he said, "that is also true." She turned from the window and looked at him across Iris's sleeping face. He looked back. The city lights had started to appear along the highway corridor, the familiar density of illumination that meant they were nearly home. And in that shifting light, Rowan looked like something that had been through a process that stripped away everything non-essential and left only the structural. The cut dried to a dark line on his jaw, the shadow under his eyes, the look of a man who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and has just set it down. "Tomorrow is going to be complicated," she said. "Yes, whatever you agree to with Rourke, I need to know before you agree to it, not after." "Okay, I mean that, Rowan. I know you mean it." He held her gaze. "I will tell you everything before I tell him anything." She looked at him for another moment. Then she turned back to the window. The city came back around the car like a tide returning. Ellis drove. Iris breathed between them, and the silence of the car was not the silence of things unresolved, but the silence of two people who have come through something at considerable cost and are now sitting in the quiet on the other side of it. The doctor came at 10:30 that evening, a compact woman named Dr. Claire Brennan, who arrived with a bag and asked no questions about the circumstances and examined Iris with the careful thoroughness of someone who understood the examination needed to be both complete and ordinary feeling for the child. She had the gift of maintaining conversation throughout, asking Iris her opinions on various animals while conducting the clinical work, so that by the time she was done, Iris had apparently spent the last hour having an interesting discussion rather than being assessed. "She is physically fine," Brennan told Nora in the hallway. "There may be some disrupted sleep, some anxiety in the coming weeks. It will pass." She paused. "How are you?" "I am functional." "That is not what I asked. It is what I have right now." Brennan looked at her for a moment with the assessment of a woman who had been doing this long enough to know what functional meant as a coping strategy, and when it needed to be revisited. "Call me if she has nightmares that persist past the first week," she said. "And call me when you get to the part where functional is not enough anymore." She left. Nora went to Iris's room and sat on the edge of the bed and watched her daughter sleep, with the bear hat on the bedpost where it always went, and the stuffed rabbit under one arm. She sat there until the shaking stopped. It did not take as long as she expected. Rowan appeared in the doorway. He did not come into the room. He stood at the threshold. "She told Dr. Brennan that her favorite animal is a rabbit," he said. "She has been definitive about it for 8 months, Nora said. "What was before the rabbit?" "Horses. And before that, frogs." He was quiet for a moment. Building the archive of a child's history he had been absent from and was now reconstructing from available material. "I missed a lot," he said. "You missed everything she said. Not as an accusation, as the truth stated clean. But she is 4. She has a long way to go. There is a lot left." He held very still in the doorway. "You are her father," she said. "That does not get negotiated in a federal debrief. Whatever happens with Rourke, whatever the next 6 months look like, that part is not on the table." He looked at her for a long moment. "Okay," he said. His voice had the quality it got when he was holding something carefully. "Go get your face looked at," she said. "Dr. Brennan left a kit in the bathroom. I am fine. You have a 4-inch reopened cut. Go." A beat. Then she heard him move away down the hall. She found Rowan in the kitchen later. He had cleaned the cut and closed it with steri-strips applied with the competence of someone who had attended to his own wounds before. He was at the kitchen table with a glass of water and his coat off and his sleeves rolled, and he looked like what he was, a man who had been through something and had come out the other side of it and was sitting in the exhaustion that followed. She sat across from him. He looked at her. "How long has she been asleep?" he said. 20 minutes. She will be out until morning." Nora folded her hands on the table. "Tell me about Marsh, all of it." He told her. Marsh had been feeding Corvath operational intelligence for 8 months. Security schedules, financial routing, port access details. not for ideology or personal grievance, for money, and for what he had believed was a guaranteed extraction, a structure Vivian had been building for him over 3 years. She had cultivated him with the patience of someone playing a game with a very long horizon, building the relationship, identifying what he wanted, offering it in increments so that by the time he understood what he was doing, he was already too far in to see a way back. She was inside for 3 years, Nora said. Yes, she knew about me, about Iris. The intelligence recovered from Vivian's communications suggests she knew about Iris within 48 hours of the night at Ashford House, Rowan said. Marsh had a contact watching the restaurant. Standard surveillance. He reported back. Rowan's jaw worked. She knew where Iris spent 11 hours a week within the first week. Nora sat with that. Then she looked at him. The car, she said. Ellis, the daycare move. You acted in the first 2 weeks, partly because of the heat and the inspection record, he said. He held her gaze, and partly because I knew someone had the information and I needed to change the variables they were working with. He paused. I should have told you. Yes, she said. You should have. Yes. They sat with that for a moment. You are going to have to become someone different, she said. Not entirely, but the architecture of it, the way you move through the world, it has to change. I know, he said. I am working on what that looks like. It looks like telling me things before they become crises. It looks like asking instead of arranging. She stopped. It looks like the man who crouched down in the snow to talk to a 4-year-old about rowan trees. That is the one that works. He was quiet for a long moment. I do not know if I can be that man reliably, he said. Not yet. I am telling you honestly. I know you are, she said. I am not asking for reliable yet. I am asking for the direction. He held her gaze, something in his expression giving way in the way she had been watching it give way since the night at Ashford House. Same direction we have been going, he said. Then we will see where it ends up. They sat at the kitchen table for another hour, saying very little. The talking was finished for tonight, and what remained did not require words. She made tea because there was tea in the kitchen, and she needed something to do with her hands, and she made 2 cups without asking, and he drank the tea without mentioning that he did not usually drink tea, which she noted. Near midnight he said, Thank you for tonight, for Rourke, for going into that building when I told you. You told me to stay at the tree line, same instruction, different framing. She held his gaze. You know why I went in? Yes. Then you know it was not for you. I know. A pause. But you came out with her. She drank her tea. He drank his. Outside the city went on. Sleep, she said finally. There is a room at the end of the hall. He looked at her for a moment. The offer which was not an invitation, but was also not nothing. Okay, he said. She went to her room. She lay in the dark and reviewed the events of the last 24 hours, the way she reviewed things, looking for the points of failure and the points where she had actually made good decisions under conditions that did not favor good decisions. She found more of the latter than she expected. She noted that and set it aside. At some point, she slept. The debrief with Rourke lasted 4 hours. Nora and Rowan, both present across the table from Rourke, and his supervising agent, a woman named Fitch, whose questions were the best questions Nora had encountered in any room. The immunity documentation already signed. Rowan's lawyer arranged in the hour before the meeting and competent in a way that was immediately apparent, present at his shoulder. The arrangement, when Fitch put her pen down, was this: full financial disclosure of the Hale Network's operations across 7 years. Complete testimony regarding the Corvath organization, its American distribution, infrastructure, its personnel at every operational level, its financial architecture. Testimony regarding 3 subsidiary operations Rourke had been building toward for 2 years, and which Rowan could close in a week. In exchange, a negotiated outcome, significant financial penalties, a supervised transition of all business operations, 18 months of structured cooperation, no incarceration, monitored but functional, not clean, not without consequence, but present and alive, and on the right side of an accounting that could have gone in a permanently different direction. Fitch looked at the terms and said, "This is generous." Rourke said, "The intelligence value is significant." Fitch looked at Nora. "Was this your framework?" "I identified the shape of a possible arrangement," Nora said. "Mr. Hale made his own decision. They signed the documents." In the hallway afterward, Rowan stood beside her waiting for the elevator and said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "The shape of a possible arrangement. It is what I did. You negotiated a federal cooperation agreement between 2 parties in approximately 17 hours while your daughter was missing." He looked at her with an expression she had not seen on his face before, something specifically about her, about what she was about, everything she had done in the space between the safe house and the coffee shop, and the parking structure and the service road at Kessler Road, and what it said about the kind of person she had become while he was not watching. What she said, nothing he said, the elevator arrived. "Rowan." He looked at her. "You terrify me," she said. She held his gaze. "Good," she said. "Now you know how it feels." The elevator opened and they stepped in, and she looked at the closing doors and felt the satisfaction of a person who has said exactly the right thing at exactly the right moment, which happened rarely enough that it was worth noting when it did. 3 weeks later, Vivian Corvath was formally charged. The charging documents used her real name. Nora read about it in the legal summary Rourke sent to her email. 3 paragraphs of procedural language that represented 3 years of infiltration. The Hargrove Gala, the Kessler Road facility. The decision to use a 4-year-old child as leverage in a business dispute, all of it on record, attributed, moving through a system that was slow and imperfect, but on this occasion correctly pointed. She forwarded the summary to Rowan without comment. He responded, "I saw it, nothing else." She did not push him to talk about it. He would when he was ready. Some things about him had not changed, and some things about him she was no longer trying to change. January came cold and relentless. Iris started at Meadowbrook Learning Center on the 8th in a classroom with a teacher named Ms. Ford, who had been doing early childhood education for 11 years, and who won Iris's complete and permanent loyalty on the first day by possessing a rabbit in a cage in the corner of the room. A real one, Iris told Nora that evening with the reverence of someone reporting a miracle. His name is Percy, and he is very soft. Nora enrolled in the spring semester of the Early Childhood Education program at the community college, the degree she had started 3 years ago and deferred twice for reasons of practical necessity. 4 semesters total. She had completed 2 more, 3 nights a week by increments without announcement. The apartment on the 14th floor became where she and Iris spent most of their time. Not moving in, not a restructuring, just 3 nights, because Iris had decided. Her room there was the good room, and because Rowan was there, and because the heat worked without interruption, and because Nora was tired in a way that comes from managing alone for 4 years, and had recently discovered that not managing alone was an option she had stopped being afraid of. She did not announce this. She did not frame it. She just started bringing 3 nights' worth of things on Tuesdays. And Rowan said nothing about it except once when she arrived on a Tuesday and found that he had quietly cleared a section of the closet, and she stood in front of the cleared space for a moment and then hung her coat in it and said nothing. And he said nothing. And that was apparently how that went. The 18 months of structured cooperation with Rourke's task force began in February. Rowan spent Tuesday and Thursday mornings in a federal building, providing testimony and documentation with the systematic completeness of a man who had decided that if he was going to do this, he was going to do it the way he did everything. In April, Nora walked into an exam room at the college with the clean anxiety of someone who had studied enough and was still afraid, and 3 hours later walked out with a grade she had been working toward since October. She took a photograph of it and sent it to Rowan. His response came in under 2 minutes. "Come home. I will make dinner." She looked at the text for a moment. Come home. She had been careful deliberately and specifically, careful not to let that word settle into usage, because she knew what words did when you stopped watching them. They arrived before you were ready and built the reality around themselves while you were still deciding whether you wanted to move in. But she put her phone in her pocket and walked to the subway and took it to the right stop and walked the 3 blocks and used the key that had been on her keychain since February and rode up to the 14th floor and walked in. The apartment smelled like something being cooked. Iris was at the kitchen table with the aggressive focus she brought to drawings that mattered. Rowan was at the stove in a gray sweater with his back to her, and he turned when he heard her come in and said, "How did it go?" "Good." "How good?" "Very good." He turned back to the stove and said, "Good." Iris said, "Mama, I am drawing Percy. Do not talk to me while I am working. Understood?" Nora set her bag down. She stood in the kitchen doorway and watched Rowan at the stove and Iris at the table, and the spring evening coming through the windows in the long gold of a day that had finally decided to be warm, and she breathed, in and out and deliberate and present. "Rowan," she said, "what are you making?" "Pasta." He did not turn around. "Do not ask what kind." Why not? Because I looked it up, and I am not confident yet, and I do not want the commentary. She looked at his back, the same focused attention applied to a weeknight dinner in a gray sweater that had been applied to months of federal testimony. "It smells good," she said. "It is going to be fine. I know." She got down 3 plates. "Iris, wash your hands. I am not done. You can finish after dinner. Percy will still be there." Iris made a sound of profound injustice and slid off her chair and went to the bathroom. Nora set the table. Rowan brought the pasta and served it and sat down. She tasted it. "It is good," she said. A pause. "I know," he said. She laughed. A real laugh, the kind that arrived without scheduling. He looked at her when she laughed, with the expression she had been watching build since December, the one that had no calculation in it, that was simply a man looking at something. He was grateful, existed in his life, and being unable to fully contain that fact. Iris came back and climbed into her chair and said, "What are we eating?" Pasta, Rowan said. "Which kind?" "The good kind." Iris considered this and then nodded. "Okay," she said, with the complete trust of a child who had decided a person was reliable and required no further verification. They ate dinner. The formal cooperation period ended in August. A final meeting in the federal building. Rourke handed Rowan a document confirming the arrangement was complete and the terms fulfilled. Rowan signed it. Fitch signed it. Rourke shook Rowan's hand in the hallway, brief and professional. Then Rourke turned to Nora. He held out his hand. She shook it. "The Corvath prosecution is proceeding," he said. "Vivian's trial starts in November. We will need a brief deposition from you as a gala witness." "I know," she said. "I will be there. The task force is closing the Hale file. Officially, you are a legitimate business owner under supervised monitoring for 18 months, and after that, the supervision ends." "I understand the terms," Rowan said. "For what it is worth," Rourke said and paused. "What you did in there, the testimony, the documentation, it cost something." "I know it did. It cost what it cost," Rowan said. Rourke nodded. They left the federal building and stood on the August street with the heat coming off the sidewalk in waves, and the city moving around them in its indifferent, perpetual way. After a while, Rowan said, "It is done." "Yes." "The port arrangements, the shipping subsidiaries." He was naming things the way you named things being packed into boxes when leaving a place you had lived for a long time. Cataloging the absence. "All of it," she said. "Yes. I do not know what I am without it," he said, not with fear. With the honest perplexity of someone asking a real question they do not yet have the answer to. She looked at him. "You are a man who makes pasta on weeknights and argues with a 4-year-old about how many bites of egg constitute a complete breakfast." She held his gaze. "Start there." He looked at her. Something moved across his face, the something that had been building since December, since the park, since the diner, since the corridor at Kessler Road, present in every conversation and every silence and every moment. She had looked at him from across a room or a table or the small, sleeping body of their daughter, now fully assembled and visible without the covering he had been putting over it. "Nora," he said. "I know," she said. They stood on the August sidewalk. He reached out and She took his hand. She took it. The motion hers, the decision hers deliberate, and without qualification, and held it. The city moved around them without comment. December, again, 1 year from the night at Ashford House. The city had snow again, the same dirty, wind-driven kind that covered everything in gray and turned sidewalks into dark mirrors. Nora watched it from the window of the apartment on the 14th floor. The apartment that she had at some point in October started calling home, the word having arrived in her vocabulary without announcement, and installed itself with the permanence of something that had been waiting for permission. Iris was asleep. Percy, the second, the live rabbit, Rowan had bought for her 5th birthday in a cage with a bow and a handwritten card that said, "From Percy the First's friend, be good to him," was in his enclosure in Iris's good room. Rowan came to stand beside her at the window. She felt him there before she heard him, the way the air changed near him that she had been noticing since Ashford House, and that had, over the course of a year, gone from a threat signal to something else entirely. He stood beside her and looked out at the snow-covered city with the expression he had when he was not managing anything and not performing anything, and was simply present in a way he had been learning. He reached into his jacket pocket. She turned to look at what he was doing. He held out a ring, small, white gold, a single stone, the kind of clean precision that said more about who he had become than anything elaborate could have. He held it and looked at her. "I am not going to make a speech," he said. "Good," she said. "I am going to say one thing, and then I am going to wait." He held her gaze. "You rebuilt me, not the way I was. I know that is not possible, and I know that is not what you were doing. But whatever I am becoming, you are the reason the direction is right." He paused. "That is all." She looked at him, at the man he had been and the man he was, and the distance between those two people traveled not easily and not without cost, and not without the damage that honest living inflicts on people who are paying attention. At his hands that had been violent and that had made pasta and held Iris in the cold outside a burning facility and learned over a year of ordinary evenings to pour tea without being asked. At his eyes, which were Iris's eyes, which looked at her from across a table every morning and confirmed with the absolute conviction of a child who had decided who her people were. She took the ring from his fingers. She put it on herself. Rowan looked at her hand. "That is not traditionally," he started. "I know," she said. "I wanted to do it myself." He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved across his face. The smile that had been taking shape for a year, assembling itself gradually from all the small, unguarded moments arriving now, not large and not theatrical, just the real thing which on Rowan's face was rare enough to stop her. "Okay," he said. She looked down at her hand, at the ring on her finger, at the city below, covered in snow, that was the same snow falling the night she had walked into Ashford House with her coat soaked through and her fingers stiff and her life exactly the shape it had been for 5 years before everything changed. From Iris's room, a small sound, not waking, just the small sounds children made in deep sleep, the adjustments of a body that was fully trusting and fully rested and fully home. Rowan put his arm around her. She leaned into it. Outside, the snow fell on a city that knew nothing about any of this and would have been indifferent if it had. And below them, 5 years and 12 months from their first beginning, the lights of New York spread out in every direction into the dark. Every one of them, someone's life, someone's wreckage, someone's rebuilt thing burning away in the cold with the stubbornness of a flame that has decided it intends to keep going. She looked at the lights. She breathed. She stayed.